we're going to go to Secretary of State Marco Rubio as they announce the latest on Ukraine deals. We are watching this room right here in Geneva, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been leading high-level talks with Ukrainian officials as they work through a potential peace plan. Let's listen into the Secretary of State as he begins speaking.
I think we made a tremendous amount of progress, even from the last time I spoke to you, and I apologize for keeping you waiting, but there was more work to be done. You know, we began almost 3 weeks ago with a foundational document that we socialized and ran by both sides, and with input from both sides. And one of the things that happens when you've been involved in this now for 10 months is you get a pretty good sense of what the priorities and the red lines and the important issues are for both sides. And so that allowed us to create a foundational document, which has been an ongoing working document. In fact, over the last 96 hours or more, there's been extensive engagement with the Ukrainian side, including our Secretary of the Army and others, being on the ground in Kyiv, meeting with relevant stakeholders across the Ukrainian political spectrum, in the legislative branch and the executive branch and the military and others, to further sort of narrow these points. We arrived here today with one goal, and the goal was to take, is 28 points or 26 points, depending on which version as it continued to evolve, and try to narrow the ones that were open items. And we have achieved that today in a very substantial way. Now, obviously, like any final agreement, they'll have to be agreed upon by the presidents, and there are a couple issues that we need to continue to work on. But I think the report today is that I think today was worthwhile. It was very, very, it is probably the most productive day we have had on this issue, maybe in the entirety of our engagement, but certainly in a very long time. But work remains, and because this continues to be a working process, I don't want to declare victory or finality here. There's still some work to be done, but we are much further ahead today at this time than we were when we began this morning and where we were a week ago for certain. Okay?
You said about a couple of issues.
Yes.
Remain. Could you please specify on that?
Well, I'm not going to get into the details on the issues. This is a very delicate moment, and it's important. Like I said, there's not agreement on those yet. Some of it is semantics or language. Others require higher level decisions and consultation. Others, I think, just need more time to work through. As an aside, I will mention that there were items that we were discussing as part of the original 28, or it evolved. This is a living, breathing document. Every day with input, it changes. There were some that involved equities or the role of the EU or of NATO or so forth, and those we kind of segregated out because we just met with the national security advisors for various European countries, and those are things we'll have to discuss with them because it involves them. So we sort of really focused on the ones that were bilateral in nature for the most part. So there are a couple, none of it insurmountable. I can tell you that the items that remain open are not insurmountable. We just need more time than what we have today. I honestly believe we'll get there.
So has Ukraine indicated to you that it's prepared to compromise, for instance, on some of those key issues like territory in exchange for peace with Russia? They suggested that they are prepared. Well,
I'm not going to look. It's not because for purposes of evasion. It's just I'm not going to get into the details of the topics that were discussed because this is an ongoing process. What is important to understand and how these things work is you have to, in order to have a proposal, you have to write it. If it's just verbal, it's in the air. You have to put it down on a piece of paper, and just because it's printed on a piece of paper doesn't indicate finality. So you get input, and based on that input, you make adjustments, and then you get more input, or you make a counteroffer, and you get more adjustments. That's an ongoing process. There's a lot more of that to happen. So I'm not going to speculate or go into the details of any of the specific items in the latest version of the proposal because, frankly, by tomorrow or the next day, that may have evolved and changed further. And but I can tell you, I guess, that I feel very optimistic that we can get something done here because we made a tremendous amount of progress today.
So what happened from the attitude of the Ukrainians during this negotiation?
Oh, it was very positive. I'm telling you, today was the most productive day we have had.
Ungrateful earlier.
Well, today, and we've talked to him since, I think he's quite pleased at the reports we've given him about the amount of progress that's been made. Well, obviously, the Russians get a vote here, right? So, I mean, look, we began from the early stage of this process with our understanding of the Russian position as had been communicated to us in numerous ways. At the State Department, we received numerous written non-papers and things of this nature, also verbally, things they've discussed over time and so forth. So it was no matter what we came up with today, obviously we now have to take what we come up with, if we can reach that agreement with the Ukrainian side, to the Russian side. That's another part of this equation. You know, they have to agree to this in order for this to work.
What do you think about the counter-proposals of the
What about new deadline? Will be a new deadline, or it's...
The deadline is we want to get this done as soon as possible. Obviously, you know, we'd love it to be Thursday. We'd love to, but ultimately, the important point today is that we have made substantial progress. We've really moved forward. So I feel very optimistic that we're going to get there in a very reasonable period of time very soon. You know, whether it's Thursday, whether it's Friday, whether it's Wednesday, whether it's Monday of the following week, we want it to be soon, because people are going to, between today and the time we deal with this, more people are going to die. More destruction is going to happen. Our goal is to end this war as soon as possible, but we need a little more time. The what? I'm sorry?
To discuss the fighter jets in Poland? Was number
Yeah, I'm not going to discuss any of the particulars of it, right, frankly. As I said, this is an ongoing process, and so I think there's work to be done. I know that's deeply unsatisfying to you who have to cover these sorts of things, but I wanted to make you aware that we've made progress. I simply don't want to do anything that sets us back in that regard, and but I can tell you we've made substantial progress. Today was the best day we have had in our entire 10 months of working on these issues.
Have you confirmed that you met with the European representatives today, and what you...
Yes, yeah, we met with the national security advisors of a variety of countries that were here, and we sort of walked them through the progress we had made today. We didn't go again into tremendous detail. We assured them that items that involve both Europe and NATO directly, or that those items are items that we sort of agreed to put as part of a separate track, because it involves input from them. But I think what they heard, and I hope they'll confirm, I believe they will, is an incredible amount of positivity from both the Ukrainian and American side about the progress we've made today.
What happens tomorrow, Mr. Secretary? What's the plan for
It will
tomorrow?
only make sense if it includes a provision that says the Americans are willing to provide security guarantees similar to Article 5 of NATO. Are you receptive to this?
Yeah, again, I'm not going to discuss the details of what's being, you know, worked on with regards to any particular provisions. I mean, clearly, I think we all recognize that part of getting a final end to this war will require for Ukraine to feel as it is safe and it is never going to be invaded or attacked again. So that's clearly something that has to be discussed. I think we've made substantial progress on that and other points, but I'm not going to get into the details today about all of those. I have time for two more, guys, because I got to run somewhere. The what?
You're asking the Russians tonight.
Zelensky in the next hours?
Am I what?
Will there be a call between President Trump and Zelensky?
I don't know. It's possible. I'm not sure.
What's the plan? What happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow?
Yeah, what happens
We
from
keep
here?
working. I mean, look, this process. No. This process has been ongoing now for the better part of 3 weeks, and it's really sped up in the last 96 hours. So we have all kinds of people at technical levels that are working full time on this and engaged in this full time. In fact, even as we got up and broke up now and walked away from the table, there are a handful of technical items that we expect answers from them on, or suggestions from them on, in the next 24 hours or so. So this is an ongoing process. We don't have to be here in this building for that to move, but we thought today being here in person allowed us to make great strides, because especially since they sent such a high-level delegation who have the authority to sort of call back to their capital, talk to their president, and make and agree to certain things. So we've made a lot of progress.
The
The what?
The counter-proposals of the European, the counter-plan of the Europeans.
I'm not a work counterplan. I haven't seen any counterplan. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Any concessions you're asking the Russians
All
to
right.
register with you?
You were listening to Secretary of State Marco Rubio answering questions on what he described as one of the most productive days, or the most productive day we've had on this issue, maybe on the entirety of their engagement with the Ukrainians. Obviously a very delicate moment in trying to get toward any sort of peace proposal. Now, notably, Secretary of State Marco Rubio would not get into the exact details of this, and based on what's in the proposals, there are many questions over potential Ukrainian concessions, but he stated pretty clearly today was worthwhile, and also that there were some aspects of any potential plan that they put to the side because it would involve the role of the European Union and NATO. And while there were representatives there, that is a completely separate process that they seem to have put to the side for now. Now, one of the crucial things is that while Secretary of State Marco Rubio wouldn't get into details, he did say that the items that remain open are not insurmountable. And I'm going to quote here, "I feel very optimistic that we can get something done here." Now, the President of the United States would have to look over whatever comes out of this, along with Russia as well, because obviously this was a bilateral meeting that we were looking at here. But Secretary of State Rubio, seeming to anticipate that dynamic, said that they began from the early process in these talks with their understanding of what the Russian position was. So clearly the Secretary of State very optimistic. The President of the United States had set this deadline of Thursday, but Rubio says that the deadline is we want to get this done as soon as possible. We're going to go through some more of the details from what we just heard from the Secretary of State in this critical moment.